Okay, and we are back here at Meet Unshackled at the Manufacturers Pavilion here at MJ BizCon 2024. We got some awesome guests here. This is your host, Max Uhas from Dope SEO. And we're going to be talking about, what are we talking about? Manufacturing, third party versus doing it in-house?
Doing everything in-house versus outsourcing.
During outsourcing. Right. Okay, so with this, and I'm terrible. So anyway, I know I've got Harrison, Kyle, Adam. I'm bad at this. I should know everybody's names by now. But I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves, what you do, where you're from, and how you provide services to the industry. And then we're actually going to get into how, just the difference between it. And like, you guys have probably seen a lot more mistakes in this industry than I have. You know what I mean? At least with like doing it in-house versus doing it third party.
Right.
Yeah. So feel free. Adam, you got the mic. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yeah, so I'm Adam Presser-Smith from Project Packs. I'm the CEO there. And what we do is we cultivate premium high-end cannabis, and we actually do it for a variety of different brands. So what we do is that we took 7 of the hottest brands in California, and we were able to figure out an avenue for them to expand out into Arizona.
Nice.
And for us to not really jeopardize or hinder the integrity of their brand based upon the quality of flower that we're able to produce and uphold their level of SOPs. And what that's done is that's allow us to really get their products out to market and to expand their reach throughout the country.
That's beautiful. So brands came to you to help expand and grow their brands.
Correct.
That's beautiful. So is it white label or private label or like a...
It's white label.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, we'll get into that in a bit. Let's pass it over.
Yeah. My name is Kyle Nethery. I'm the CEO at Samson Extracts. We're a large CBD processor in Southeast Alabama. We process roughly 250,000 pounds of hemp a month. For the focus of CBD isolate. So a lot of our fun comes from contracting acreage across the United States, whether it be Kentucky, Minnesota, Texas, Florida, North Dakota. This year we're contracting roughly 1,200 acres. It's coming down right now for the harvest side, and it's a large scale distillation towers, 4-story tall.
Wow! Really,
it's a lot different than what you'd see typically in the marijuana industry, which I spent time, roughly 3.5-4 years in Michigan, on the cultivation processor side. So it's large scale, low cost CBD manufacturing.
And that's, it's funny because originally when you said Alabama, I was like, you're growing everything in Alabama, but like this is a multi-state.
It is
cannabis grow, CBD grow, hemp grow. Let's be right here.
Yeah, and it has to kind of default because Alabama's got a tougher soil than you'll see in a lot of other states with sandier bottoms. We often joke that we could fertilize our dirt with a lot of other states' dirt, and also high heat, high humidity, those types of things. And the other piece is Alabama is largely row croppers, and row croppers don't translate well to the cannabis industry because heavily mechanized equipment, lack of infrastructure, things like that. We typically look for tobacco farmers, people that are more attuned to a manual style crop harvest than corn or cotton or soybeans like you'd see.
Just plop the seeds in the ground and let it go.
Exactly.
You need a little more hands-on.
100%.
To say the least.
Yep.
All right, cool. Then here we go. Let's have a word from our...
Yeah, my name's Harrison Bart from Custom Cones USA and Day Savers. We are the leading pre-roll supplier from everything from the paper products, filter tips, hemp wraps, to the machines and the packaging. So we work with companies in every state, Canada, even internationally. And we work with brands that do it themselves, everything in-house, to big white label manufacturers that manufacture on behalf of other people. So we've seen the ins and outs, the pros and cons of all the different routes that a business might take. Right.
And this is what I want to talk, because you guys all... Look, you're all running large scale operations. You know what I mean? This is not like you're, I've because I know because I run a marketing agency and I've had a lot of people where it's like, we got this idea, we're going to do our own CBD tinctures. I'm like, congratulations, you are never going to scale. You know what I mean? Because it's like you in your kitchen or your garage or somewhere doing it. Whereas like with you guys, I think part of the reason that people work with companies like yours is because you have the expertise, you have the knowledge, you've made the mistakes, you've learned from the mistakes, you have the SOPs. And you're, excuse my French, but you're not going to fuck up somebody else's shit, like to make sure that it goes the right way along those boards. from that end, essentially, it's like if somebody was coming from like, hey, we have an established brand, like people really love us here, but we want to grow. You know what I mean? Like, what's the advice that you can give somebody on that end to, like, let's just put it this way, like, why custom cones? You know what I mean? Like, why you guys? What if I was running a CBD farm? Because listen, I live in Texas. Like, I spoke at Texas A&M, the Texas Hemp Convention thing a couple of years ago, and I didn't realize how much hemp was being grown and CBD was being grown in Texas through the University of A&M, like Texas A&M, just for testing the soil and everything else. They're just pumping it out. And then they're like, oh, we've got a big grow there. I'm like, you've got to grow in where, and it's indoor or whatever. But it's like, there's a lot of stuff being grown that nobody knows about. You know what I mean? And then it's like, do you do it yourself or do you hire a professional? And then it's like, I don't think we really need to sell on why you hire a professional, but I think we need to cover the points on if you do it yourself versus hiring a professional. If I were to develop a paper company and I wanted to make my own pre-rolls, why would I choose custom codes versus making my own paper?
Yeah, no, I mean, so there's some companies here that are trying to sell automated cone making machines now.
Right.
It's hard to do everything yourself. Do you really need to be making your own cones to supply your manufacturing, buy like $1 million piece of equipment so you could get your cones? Like use like Coca-Cola and all these other big companies, they're not making all their own packaging.
They're not making their bottles.
No, they're working with packaging companies that have expertise and scale to supply that. They're working with these big multinational companies. You do have to do some stuff by yourself. You have to learn, you need to know how to do things. But these big companies, these MSOs that are expanding into other states,
right?
Especially when it's like a big brand, like a Jeter, when they're expanding into other states, they're not necessarily setting up their own operations in each state. They're finding someone that already has that infrastructure in place that they could trust to take their SOPs and then make that product. But you have to have that SOP made.
Right.
You're learning how to do that on your own the first time around. But then to scale, you don't need to keep doing it over and over.
Right.
Again.
You don't need to be there hands-on because you're one person. You know what I mean? You can't be at 15 different grows. You can't be... You're not extracting every batch, and you're definitely not making every pre-roll yourself. You know? Yeah.
And I can add on to that or after you.
And I just like to say, like, a lot of people want to get into the cannabis industry because they're so passionate about cannabis, but it's like, are you a farmer? Are you ready to start an agriculture business?
Right. Yeah. Five plants in your basement, you know what I mean, versus 10 acres versus like, a 500 plant grow. There's lessons to be learned there.
Yeah. So you don't necessarily need to grow all your own cannabis, especially as a pre-roll company or pre-roll brand. You could easily source that on the open market. It's way cheaper and there's a lot of supply out there, so you can get it for a low cost. You have to do your due diligence to make sure it's good quality cannabis, but you don't need to grow all of your own product.
Truth.
And I think that's a bit of a textbook challenge when whenever you're doing something like, say you want to make your own cones, you have to ask yourself, is that a revenue driver or is that a cost cutter?
Or is that a time waster?
Exactly. I think that's where a lot of people get caught in a hot spot when it comes to doing things in-house is there's already enough headaches with your revenue drivers, whether you're doing cultivation or you're in manufacturing, there's enough headaches that go along with that. And you want to reduce your amount of headaches when it's more for a cost-cutting function than anything. Because even if you're making them your own, I mean, you're probably talking about fractional cost-cutting amongst the entirety of the profit margin on that side. And if that machine goes down, you're now dead in the water when it actually isn't doing anything to derive revenue for you at the end of the day. It actually is creating problems. And so I think that's a constant, even when you look at with companies when they start to over skew, like in Michigan, my marijuana company, 178 SKUs.
Jesus.
We made the majority of our money from 25% of those SKUs. And so it's common in marijuana where you add all these products because you're like more products equals more money. But then square footage is a premium, employees are a premium, and you're actually taking away from the products that's actually your kind of bread and butter when it comes to your revenue base.
Right. And then so that means 150 dead products you're sitting on, or just stuff that just you don't need as much of all the time. Like if anything, they'd probably sell better if you did them in like a smaller drop or like, hey, we're only releasing. It's like the McRib, Look, would the McRib be as popular if it was on if it was on the menu all the time, or or it's like McRib? You're like, oh, I don't eat McRibs, but just for an example, actually, I look like I eat McRibs. So,
but no, I think that you're spot on. I think the best thing that people can do really is understand what your lane is, and then stick to it. Right? Like most brands are great at two things: sales and marketing. And then outsource everything else that you can, but understand your SOPs, what you want for quality, and then just have the right steps in place so that you can continue to succeed and grow your brand.
Truth. Because it has to be like that. Because you can't harvest, you can't make the pre-rolls and do everything else if you're also trying to sell and market your products. Like it's like, where's your strength? What do you do? Well, I'm in the back right now, cutting down a grow. You know what I mean? I'm drying everything. I can't talk to you for another couple of weeks. You know what I mean? Like, it mucks up the works. And I think it comes along the lines of, even when it comes to the marketing aspect of this, You know, it's like, are you doing all the marketing in house, or is anybody else helping you with any of this as well? You know, because it's like, just because your cousin is really good at posting Instagram photos doesn't mean that they know the compliance aspect of this for your cannabis business. You know what I mean? Like, just because they take really good pictures of themselves in selfies doesn't mean they're going to take good product photos for your products to implement them the right way. Right. You know, so so this is essentially like, do it in house or use a third party. Like, there is a reason that businesses are in business. You know what I mean? And I think, especially along the lines here, like, you guys are here to help other people grow their businesses. Well, in general.
And you see it in a lot of other areas too, right? Like, there's a lot of great companies where you can outsource HR,
right,
and be able to go with that for a third party perspective, right?
Right.
So, I mean, it only makes sense that you're able to do that same thing in the cannabis space and through all the different verticals that operate within your business.
Yeah, and just and do what you're really good at, if anything.
And there's a decently solid chance too, where if we use the cone example, what we're talking about right now, that if your MOQs aren't high enough to get your cone provider down to a reasonable price you'd expect, you probably have no business getting in the automation space at all anyways, because if there's anything I've seen, marijuana companies have a lot of pre-roll machines that get about 15% capacity time across their entire production spectrum, and so they really should think why they're doing that in the first place.
Well, what's weird is I've run into people that actually, like, they try to roll the cost of the machine into the pre-rolls, and now they're like, these went from $4 pre-rolls to $12 pre-rolls because I have to pay for this machine. You know what I mean? That's doing all this automation. Right. It's like, but it's still the same pre-roll, you know, whereas look, you understand you're not, you understand what you need to make, but at the same time, it's like, isn't the whole goal to sell more versus, like, I'm not going to name drop anybody, but there's a few rappers out there that you're reading about and you're like, they sell $50 pre-rolls. You know what I mean? And it's like, who's buying a $50 pre-roll when you can go get a pre-roll anywhere else? Because, like, once you smoke it, it's gone. You know what I mean? It's not like a $50 piece of clothing or, you know, a premium. It's not a collectible. You're going to smoke it. You know what I mean? Unless you're, look at this, I spent $50 on, and I never touched it because it was $50. Like, I think it's, you know, cannabis is a consumable. Hemp is a consumable. CBD is a consumable. It's to be consumed. You know what I mean? So it's like, the more you can get out there, the more people can use it. And it's like, if anybody can help you get to market, get out there, and keep the demand. You know what I mean? Keep the supply with the demand as well. Because I think one of the other things that smaller operators don't understand is, if you have a really good product and you don't have the foundation to support the demand, guess what? Like, you're only in business 2 or 3 or 4 times a year because, oh, wait, we sold out. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't realize that we have to keep a crop rotation in place to have product for demand to have everything else.
Yeah, and this stuff like ebbs and flows as your business is growing. It's not. I strongly suggest when you're first starting off, you do outsource a lot of things. Then as you figure it out, you could cut costs by bringing it in-house, but then it's not uncommon as you're looking to then scale and expand that you then start outsourcing again. But you've learned throughout that process, you figured out what works, what doesn't work, and then you have those SOPs and those relationships dialed in. And then a lot of times people are trying to cut costs. So, like, people will print their own labels in-house, and then they're typically a lower quality label. Like, they're sticky. You feel
or they don't, or they choose the wrong printer. Or, you know what I mean? They're like, oh, I bought a printer, and then the printer is like, labels
aren't straight. They're not.
Labels aren't straight, but they also, like, print white text on a black background with like a you know what I mean? It's super thin, and then when you print it, it's all blurry. You're like, these are crap. You printed $1,000. You printed 1,000 labels that look, you can't read. You know what I mean? Like, there's all sorts of weird little things and nuances that you're like, you did that.
Yeah, and they're thinking of some of the costs, the raw material costs, but not the overhead, the labor.
Right.
You need to have someone trained to do these things.
Right.
So, yeah, oftentimes it's the same thing, and you're getting a lower quality product if you're not actually good at making that type of thing. Absolutely.
And I feel like this is why people come to companies like yours. You know what I mean?
Well, and also you got to look at, like in today's space, right? Like, it's fundraising isn't exactly the easiest thing. So wanting to do everything yourself and have the capital to be able to do that is very high risk, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's a great way to outsource, go with third parties, and then be able to kind of test your product and your brand and your presence in a particular market. And then if you want to double down on that, then you have some extra capital. So then you can go ahead and maybe stand up your own operations where you might be able to be more profitable in the long run. But I mean, I think that's something that people got to think about too.
Then the other piece to that as well, even in those moments when you're looking at that, is why outsourcing is good. Is because you actually have an understanding of what your business can do or should do at that point in time. Because what makes me absolutely sick of this industry is a new entrant, new state potentially goes out and buys way too many $1 million pieces of equipment and have
And then you just collect dust, like, because they don't know.
the ignorance of the used equipment market drives me bonkers. And it's like even at Samson, you know, when I got there, we were doing 16,000 pounds. We're up to $250,000.
Yeah.
The only thing we've ever bought that's been new was pumps and motors because it doesn't make sense to buy those things.
Right.
And so there's a you need to understand what your business can actually support, because even in, let's say you do go buy that fancy piece of CapEx, equipment wants to be ran.
True.
And so if you go out and buy a large piece of equipment for some type of automation in-house and you're running it at a 10% to 15% capacity load, that piece of equipment will run worse. It will have a lower quality output. The stuff wants to be ran, and you have to have a firm understanding when you should just be investing on your CapEx side of incremental growth. You know, if you want to make 15,000 of X, buy something that buys 15,000 X. When you achieve that, then step it up to 25, step it up to 30, you know, whatever these things are. But people jump into it as if they're, you know, I know they're trying to meet their investor forecast.
Right. No, but it's essentially, it's like buying a Ferrari and only driving it around your neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like, that engine wants to open up, dude. like you're not going to get top performance unless you take it out.
Yeah, and then like, don't just think of it as a purely transactional relationship. Like your suppliers, it should be like
It's growth. You build a partnership.
They're bringing expertise.
Yeah.
They're teaching you about new trends, product specs that you don't know about. Like you're gonna have to hire someone that understands like all of these nuances, or you could work with a supplier that's bringing more value than just the item. It's all the expertise and knowledge that they're going to give you as well. And in the cannabis industry, they've seen it go wrong in California and Michigan, and then they're going to tell you, don't do that, don't do this, or this is how the industry plays out over the next couple of years.
Yep.
And that's incredibly valuable information that you would only lose or you get through trial and error in other ways.
Well, I think also even on so many other on a different vertical, from a growth standpoint, from a budgeting standpoint, you know what I mean? When you work with the manufacturer, you know what I mean? When you're working with somebody that can actually help them grow, it's not them investing all of their own money right away. Like, I just bought this machine and now I need to spend X amount of time to learn how to do this. You know, it's like you said, it's like you're getting the knowledge, you're getting the information, you're getting the guidance, because trust me, if they're doing this, like, you guys are helping walking them through the whole process.
Yeah, you don't have to deal with the learning curve, right?
You don't have to deal with the learning curve, but also it's like you don't have to kick all the not even just all the money up front for you to now learn how to do what you guys are already doing. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah, and you could like buy everything yourself in terms of packaging. There's labels, there's jars, there's tubes, there's caps. So you can go one at a time and find 15 different companies to buy all that from. But if you find one company to buy it all from and pay a little bit more, you'll save that in terms of having to have like 15 different invoices getting sent out and following up and then tracking it. And then maybe one of them includes customs clearance, the other one doesn't. Then something gets stuck in customs, and then you don't have that. So sometimes it's like penny wise, pound foolish, and you're not really saving time or money.
We had an e-com customer one time that had to halt sales because they didn't have lids for their jars. They had orders coming in. They're like, we have the jars, we just don't have the lids, and the lids won't be here for 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, lids is from another vendor. We saved a couple pennies.
Right. We saved a couple pennies on lids. So this is why, if you're thinking about going and doing it yourself,
yeah, and the big MSO companies,
that's all we're saying.
Like, they don't want to buy from a million different vendors. Like, a lot of the smaller companies think like, okay, well, we could save if we could just go on Alibaba and find it direct. But as you grow and scale, you'll realize it's a lot more of a headache.
It's more headache and more time spent fixing stuff. So,
go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to add on to that. I think a lot of the MSOs really started to kind of like figure that out, right? Like they can't be a jack of all trades, right? They have to outsource some things. They have to outsource whether it be marketing, brand development, cultivation, extraction, and it's making them more profitable as well.
Right. Well, it's the Bruce Lee punch. You know what I mean? It's like practice one punch 10,000 times versus practice 10,000 punches one time. Right. You know, essentially it. Listen, they're giving me the wrap it up. Simple. If you want to drop something real quick.
No, I mean, the one thing I was going to say real quick, because we talked outsourcing, but it's in-house really quickly, is I think one thing that I think everyone has to be cognizant of is on your in-house is bringing trades in-house. I don't think is done enough in this industry. Trades are dying, and the workforce is becoming slower and slower. So I think when you talk about in-house, HVAC technicians, bring them in.
Word. That's huge.
Word.
We have... I've got just 2 HVAC guys and an electrician that are on site at my cultivation facility.
You need
because
them.
of how quickly they can turn a room around, fix anything that's going on with HVAC, so that nothing fails.
But fix it before it breaks. You know what I mean? Like, they're on top of it.
And that's where it's ongoing operations, of course, but even project execution. So like one of the biggest things we did that changed just as we brought in our own welders in because we have about a half a mile of pipe.
Okay.
Run our own waters. But anyways, I want to emphasize that
They're all giving
because
me the evil eye.
You can do it now, but you won't be able to in 10 years. Probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So listen, everybody, I super appreciate you guys jumping on. I hope this was a good panel for you all to be on. Join us. Thanks, Lynn. I don't know. This is the Meta Manufacturers Pavilion. This is your host, Max Juhas. Thank you guys so much for being on. And you'll see this on YouTube. You see this, and we'll send it all to you. And please share this. And listen, hire professionals. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Thank you.